Greetings and Shabbat Shalom from site. I'm here with my wife Christina, and we're here to talk about basically something very simple or that can expand into many different things. The seed of the Messiah, and also Happy Shavuot Eve. It's coming up real fast. Super excited, super stoked. Christina's ready to eat some meat again. So that's going to be cool. But yeah, so we're going to, in this study, I would like to trace the seed of the Messiah through history and illuminate some very biblical truths, that his messianic line comes from the most impossible situations that are meant to be a sign of the one and only Yahushua. In the process, I would like to show you that Yahuwah has a clear pattern for the Messiah. The Messiah is an incredibly pure person whose Torah and deeds are so incredibly pure that they actually become the pattern that we must try to mirror. We must try to be like that. That's what they mean by be like the mind of Yahushua. So, like we like to start, we want to start in prayer. Dear Yahuwah, we come to you in the name of Yahushua to say thank you for being the living Torah. Thank you for being the picture for us to follow, giving us the step-by-step, and even giving parables and illustrations so that we can be fully understood and fully immersed in what the mind of Yahushua is really all about, and follow the way that you have laid out for us. In the name of Yahushua, we come to Yahuwah for us to be illuminated to more truth and no more false, so we may become more and more free in your Torah, in your living word. And when we do so, we give you thanks even more so. So thank you for all that you do. In the name of Yahushua, we pray to you, Yahuwah. Amen.
Amen.
So the answer, in part, is that the Messiah will come at a time when it is impossible or highly improbable that he will come. And he will come from a place that seems like there's no hope whatsoever. The circumstances of his birth, his parentage, and his deeds will stem so unlikely as to preclude investigation. This is the impossible and totally unexpected pathway that we will be studying, and this is the pathway that we must understand and try to discern if we are to recognize the one and only Hebrew Messiah, and all the others are just thieves and robbers. The Jewish people, the Yahudim, are expected to expect the unexpected. What are a people of the impossible? What are they? And when the Messiah first appears, he will not be accepted by all. Many will cast doubts upon him because he won't be what they expected. Some will deride him and say that he is deranged, and all because it is not the way they would have arranged.
Right. I think that's so.
Author unknown. That's a quote. That's a poem I found, but I was unable to find the author. As Yahuwah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
As Yahuwah plays by the rules of the creation that he made, using trickery to outsmart the spiritual realm, so to speak, he often ends up outsmarting many of us as well. When we judge situations only by how they appear on the surface, we are in big danger of misjudging people, events, and things, and condemning them rather than appreciating their role within Yahudim and the history. So when we drown in the world of our false realities that we've created, that is, we only view things on a superficial level. We can end up destroying that which is eternally valuable and saving that which ought to be destroyed. Very little is often what it seems to be on the surface in Yahudim history. And I think a major lesson of Torah and the underlying teaching of Torah is that one of the aspects of the Messiah's advent is that his impossible coming came from an impossible place, and that it actually was transformed into the best possible scenario when in all final conclusions understood, it was the best possible solution. Thus, the impossible will not only allow people to, it will not only allow the people to see that the possible, but it will become the most obvious way.
Right.
So, the outcome of this study, in the hearts of those who care to listen, the hearts who care to study this is faithful obedience. Faith. But in Hebrew or Yahudim, they call it Imanua. Emunah. E-M-U-N-A-H. Imanua. And it has a dual meaning. It is related to the word that basically means to train or accustom oneself, and also the word for power and strength. So this definition is very misleading if you just have a basis of the understanding of faith. The basis of imanu, or imana, kind of like mana. So imana, the basis of imana is knowledge. So faith, the basis of faith, you could say, is knowledge. We start with knowledge, and then we are faithfully obedient to that knowledge. We have faith. Faith is our faithful obedience to a knowledge, something you connect to so thoroughly that you would give your life for it. Faith must be the same as the knowledge that you exist. After this is required. So then one must be faithfully obedient to that knowledge despite the influence of the lower self. So the pinnacle of faith is to connect with knowledge so thoroughly that you can experience its future pleasures. So faith is reference to a seed. So just as you know without any doubt that a seed will produce a plant with fruit if it's properly cared for, so faith is something you know. It is something that is certain. The blindness of faith is that you don't have the end result now, even though you know that what the end result will be. A lot of rabbis teach that a person is a seed. A seed has two possible uses. It can be eaten immediately as food. A person without faith will eat the seed now. A person without faith is literally eating himself. In the world to come, there will be nothing left. But then the second school of thought is that it can be planted so that it will yield fruit forever. In order to yield fruit, it must be planted. A person with faith will plant the seed. A person with faith will plant himself and undergo decay in order that he will yield fruit, which yields seeds, which yields fruit for all eternity. The seed contains everything, but it is hidden in the darkness. Faith is the seed of the next world. If you water and fertilize it correctly, it will disintegrate, and only after the disintegration will it begin to sprout and produce more seeds in an infinite amount of fruit production. A seed yields its fruit in the darkness, and only with the tremendous faithful obedience to a multitude of tasks by the one who planted it.
Right.
So the following table that I want to lay out basically compares the formation of a seed to the formation of a human. For one, a seed begins with the egg and is fertilized. The seed contains all the genetic material of the parents. Well, when you look at a baby, a fetus begins with the egg, is fertilized. The fetus contains all the genetic material of the parents. If you look at the seed, it starts out attached to its source of life, which is the plant. Well, how does the egg start out in a mother? It starts out attached to its source of life, her mother. If you look at a seed, while in the pod the seed does not need water, fertilizer, or soil, it grows well with an environment of air only. But when the baby, compared to this in the baby, while it's in the room, the fetus does not need air, light, space for movement, food, or waste removal. Its lungs are filled with water without ill effect. When you look at the seed, the death process begins with the seed, and the seed is viable, and the pod basically splits, and it is exposed to the world while still attached to its source of life. In the human, the death process begins when the baby is viable, and the womb opens up and is exposed to the world while still attached to the source of life. You see, during this death process of the seed, the plant begins to turn brown and becomes decaying or whatever. Well, during this death process in the human, the mother looks and sounds like she is what? Dying. So, when the seed is attached from its source of life, the plant, and falls to the ground, it is no longer receiving nourishment from the plant. Same thing when the baby is detached from its source of life, his or her mother, and is caught up in the arms of the midwife, it is no longer receives food and oxygen from the mother. When the seed gets covered with dirt, the seed begins dying and decaying. During birth, in the human, the baby's blood circulation reverses. As a hole in the heart closes and begins filling the lungs, the baby begins dying in the womb. And when the seed suddenly cannot remain viable without soil, water, fertilizer, and weed control, and then in the human, suddenly the baby cannot remain viable without air, light, space for movement, food, and waste removal. Same thing. So when the seed sprouts and begins growing into a mature plant, same as the baby grows and begins growing into an adult. The seed that became a plant now begins producing fruit and many other seeds. And as a human, the seed that became a fetus, that became a baby, that became an adult, is now producing many seeds and fruit. So the phrase of rational knowledge, it's called daytime. During this phase, we focus on the outward thing because they are the focus. So the phase of blindness is referred to nighttime. This is related to the concept of night, the time which we cannot see. To experience night as it really is, without artificial light, is to experience what faith really is. During the phase, we focus on the inward things because they are all the only things we can see with clarity. The blindness of faith is the blindness of planting a seed. You know that a seed can produce much fruit and many more seeds with an enormous amount of work when it's planted. We start with knowledge. It is not the idea that I can plant something, anything, and blindly hope that it will produce. Faith is knowing that a seed will produce. Because we can have faith, we need to have knowledge. Because before we can have knowledge, we must have a place for the knowledge. This place is the possibility that something may be true. It is a doubt. This possibility is enough to start basing our life on this possibility.
Right.
Faith in Yahuwah is something that we must find expression in action. This idea is also repeated in what's called the New Testament, or the Renewed Testament. It says, James 2:17, even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. The Torah tells us that when Israel was attacked by Amalek, Moses raised up his hands toward heaven. And when he did so, Israel was able to overcome its enemy. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah explains that Moses' uplifted hands directed the people's attention to Yahuwah, and their faith helped bring them victory in battle.
Amen.
In describing Moses' action, the Torah says, Vayahai Yadav Emanua, or his hands were faith. Faithful, this means that faith is something that we must be basically used through one's hands, through action. One must express his faith through the outward action of his hands. A secondary source, the Talmud, in the Shabbat, refers to the Messianic order of the Zeram as faith. And the commentary of Tosafot explains that this is because the act of planting seeds with the hope that they will ultimately yield a crop entails a certain degree of faith.
Right.
So, Exodus 17:12, but Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady. His hands were faith, as it says, until the going down of the sun. So Moses' hands had faith.
Right.
We surely cannot say that the hands had faith. Rather, we must say that they were faithfully obedient. That's a better way. The Talmudic volume about farming and agriculture, usually known as Seder Zaraim, or it's translated the Order of the Seeds, has another name. It's called the Order of Faith. So think about it. Farmers plant seeds in a dark, damp place where they begin to decay, believing all along that there will be fruit after they water, fertilizer, weed, train, and protect from insects and other pests and all these things. Thus we learn that the one who plants has faith. Faithful obedience to the tasks at hand. He knows what's going to come when he plants the seed. He knows all the other stuff he's going to have to do. That the order of the world will continue and his seeds will grow and yield fruit. Based on the verses in the prophets, tells us that the section of the seeds is referred to as faithful obedience. This is because regardless of the quality of the soul, the seeds and the farmer's labor, if the rains of the blessing and the other elements which are necessary for the growth of the crop do not happen, there is no harvest. The farmer, understanding his dependency on nature's order, is therefore compelled to be having a belief in Yahuwah. This is the blind aspect of faithfulness. This study is designed to give us knowledge, or dot, so that we can begin to be faithfully obedient. Like I said, the advent of the Messiah will be so unexpected that it could not possibly be predicted. This pathway is revealed in many regards. Messiah is always referred to as a plant. The aspects of a plant that is emphasized is that it often remains underground, out of sight for long periods of time before rising to the surface. As Messiah remained hidden until he will come to the fore, the Radak and the Ibn Ezra, note that the gematria, which is the Hebrew letter sum of numerical equivalents of the word of basically the plant, or Tejamak, is the same as Menachem, which is the name for the Messiah. So the Targum says outright that the meaning of the term Mashiach, or Messiah, is that literal meaning.
Right.
So we speak in our prayers of the Messianic era in the way that is the way of the plant, so to speak, to break forth from the ground. A seed is the picture of something unexpected, and until a seed is detached from the living plant, detached from its source of life, it can do nothing until it is utterly cut off and alone. It can be nothing more than a speck until the seed then goes into a hidden place and rots. It can never sprout. This rotting, this disintegrating process is the last thing that you would expect from something that is about to yield new life, no?
Right.
And just when it seems that all is lost, a new plant bursts through the ground.
Amen. That's right.
So consider the following messianic verses as an illustration of Messiah, Yahushua, the plant. In Isaiah 11:10, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. Check out Romans 15:12. And again, Isaiah said, there shall be a root of Jesse, and he that shall rise to reign over the Gentiles, in him shall the Gentiles trust. Check out Zechariah 3:8. Hear now, O Yahushua, the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. Zechariah 6:12. And speak unto him, saying, thus speaketh Yahuwah of hosts, saying, behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of Yahuwah. Check out John 15:4. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine. No more can ye, except ye abide in me. John 15:5. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing.
Amen. That's right.
So we see the same kind of unexpected result when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, and when a person dies and is resurrected. We must learn to know and understand the unexpected process of this disintegration process, which will produce the Messiah. We must learn to see the hidden flower of Messiah. Folks often wonder how the Messiah can come to our lowly and underserving generation. Yet, from the illustration of a seed, we can see that this is exactly the time when the Messiah must come.
Yep.
The seed of the Messiah will always be found in a hidden place. In the same way the seed is planted in the ground, which is in a hidden place, and sprouts in a place which is so dark, it's seemingly impure, that it could not possibly be so, and yet it is. If we were to attempt to identify the father and mother of the Messiah in our generation, where would we look? Would we not look to our Jewish rabbis and leaders? Would we not expect the Messiah to come from a great worthy family? The reason we look to greatness to find the Messiah is because we know that an apple never falls very far from the tree. A son always resembles his parents. Since we know that the Messiah is a towering personality of such incredible purity, then we would expect his parents to be great and pure. What we find, however, is that the messianic seed is always found in circumstances which seem impure, and from parents that seem to be acting in a very lowly manner. As we study, we find out that the appearances can be very deceiving. What looks like sin and impurity turns out to be immense mitzvah that only the greatest of folks can achieve. We will see that the messianic line has such great people that they have the ability to do a sin for the sake of heaven, so to speak, and thereby change that sin into mitzvah, redemption, rejoicing, and in a closer, intimate relationship with Yahuwah. So the beginning of the messianic revelation is where Yaakov tried to tell his sons about the final messianic period in Genesis 49. Genesis 49:1. And Yaakov called his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. His revelation of the messianic pathway was taken away from Yaakov, and indeed from the world. We were, however, left some very interesting clues to where the Messiah would be found. Check out this secondary source, Sanhedrin 98a. It says, Levi met Elijah standing by the entrance of Simon B. Yochanan's tomb, and he asked him, have I a portion in the world to come? He replied, if the master desires it, Yahushua b. Levi said, I saw two, but heard the voice of a third. He then asked him, when will the Messiah come? Go and ask himself. When was his reply, where is he sitting? At the entrance. And by what sign may I recognize him? He is sitting among the poor lepers. All of them unite them all at once, and rebandage them together, whereas he unites and rebandage each separately before treating the next, thinking should I be wanted, it being time for my appearance as the Messiah, I must not be delayed through having to bandage a number of sores. So he went to him and greeted him, saying, Peace upon thee, master and teacher. Peace upon thee, O son of Levi, he replied. When wilt thou come, master? Asked he. Today, was his answer. On his return to Elijah, the latter inquired, What did he say to the thief? Peace upon thee, O son of Levi. He answered. Thereupon Elijah observed, He thereby assured thee and thy father of a portion in the world to come. He spoke falsely to me. He rejoined, stating that he would come to a day, but has not. He, being Elijah, answered him, This is what he said to thee. Today, if you will hear his voice. So, the following folks were part of the Messianic line. I wanted to highlight their story, their perfections, and their apparent impotence that they pose to the Messianic line. Why? Because, okay, let's start off with Abraham. Isaac was an only son. Is he Pharaoh's son or Amalek's son? Sarah was taken as wife by Amalek and by Pharaoh. And this is Genesis 20. How can we be sure this is Abraham's son? Well, in Genesis 21, the Torah says that these are the children of Abraham. Abraham gave birth to Isaac. On this verse, we could see, well, why does this verse repeat Abraham? Wouldn't it just be enough to say that Rasha says that after Yahuwah changed Abraham's name, Isaac was born to emphasize Abraham's new name? So wouldn't it be enough just to say Valeh Tolot Abraham? But Isaac was born to emphasize Abraham's new name. His second explanation is imposed that people were saying that Amalek was the biological father of Isaac because when Sarah was living with Abraham, she was not pregnant. However, when she was with Amalek for one night, the next verses say that Sarah was pregnant. In order to prevent people from saying this, Yahuwah made Isaac the spitting image of Abraham, and the verses say, Holid et Isaac Yitzzik. It is worth noting that Sarah became pregnant because she prayed for Amalek and his household that their openings, which had been shut up by Yahuwah, should be open, especially for pregnancy. Was Abraham a sterile mule? The Midrash indicates that Nimrod and the rest of his folks thought Abraham to be a sterile mule. In the end, Isaac was born with the exact appearance of his father, and the Messianic line progressed. He was born with the exact appearance of his father in order that no one should say that he was the son of Amalek. Sarah, Abraham's wife, was 90 years old and barren. Not only barren, but our teachers teach us that she had no womb. This is a clear issue for the Messianic line. Genesis 11:30 says, But Sarah was barren, she had no child. And when you check this out, it says Yemavot 64a, Rabbi teaches that Abraham and Sarah were originally of doubtful sex, for it is said, Look upon to the rock whence you were hewn, and to the hole of the pit whence you were digged. And this is followed by the text, Look upon unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bore you. But nevertheless, Isaac's birth was the proof that Yahuwah had first created and then opened the barren womb and crafted a son who would be able to ascend the altar, bound as a sacrifice to Yahuwah. This was the greatness of the Messianic line. This was also the pattern whereby the Messianic line is hidden in impossible situations, in order that the unclean forces will suckle elsewhere and be deceived into thinking that the Messiah will not come from this source. Secondly, Lot and his daughters. Abraham's nephew was named Lot. In speaking about Lot, the Midrash says the following about Genesis. What's this? Genesis Midrash Rabbah. They had flocks and herds and tents. He had 2 tits, Ruth the Moabites and Naaman the Ammonites. And similarly is written, arise, that take thy wife and thy 2 daughters that are found. This is in Genesis. That means 2 finds, Ruth and Nehemiah. I have found David my servant, as it says Psalms. Where did I find him? In Sodom. In Sodom. This is confirmed in the Psalms. The above Midrash indicates that the Messiah, will be found in Sodom, the most intensely negative and impure place that the world has ever known and the world has ever seen. There will Lot and his 2 daughters be. Part of the Messianic line.
Wow.
So yes, he did come from Sodom. Yes, absolutely. Our beloved Messiah came from Sodom. Technically. So Genesis 19:30, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar. And he came in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will let lie with him, though we preserve seed of our father. And that they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, behold, I lay yesterday night with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him. And he perceived not what she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bore a son, and called his name Moab, the same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and is called the name Ben-Ammi, the same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Thus we see Ammon and Moab were born from incest in a place just removed from Sodom. From Moab we find Ruth, and from Ammon we find Naaman. Check out Ruth 4:13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went into her, Yahuwah gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, blessed be Yahuwah, which had not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel, and he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath bore him. And Naomi took the child, and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the woman her neighbors gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed, and he is the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Wow.
So 1 Kings 14:21 says, and Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 70 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahuwah did choose out of all the tribes of Israel, to put his name there. And his mother's name was Nahmai, and Ammonitess. So Lot went to Sodom, and a proverbially wicked place, to teach the people about Yahuwah and his ways. On the night that Sodom was destroyed, Lot was enjoying Purim and basically a Pesach Seder, while feeding two messengers of Yahuwah, angels. Lot was a very great man. He was great enough that in his merit, he and his entire family was extracted before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Thus we find Messiah in Sodom. Yahuwah extracted the Messiah, sparks, from the Gentiles, the Goim, and built them into the Messiah. He built those sparks in the cave of incest. This incest was converted by Lot's daughters into a very great mitzvah, so great that the mitzvah and the ones who performed it, that the messianic line was drawn through them. Yeah, how can incest be a mitzvah? How can this be a good deed? Well, Lot's two daughters believed that the three of them were the only people left on the earth. It was their desire to fulfill the command of Yahuwah that they should multiply and fill the earth. Since their father was the last man on earth, they thought therefore they did what to them must have been the most disgusting thing in the whole world. They slept with their own father. Today we find this disgusting. How much more so must it have been with the towering spiritual greatness of Lot's family? Our rabbis teach that it is greater to do a sin for the right reason than to do a mitzvah for the wrong reason. So Lot's two daughters did his sin for the sake of heaven. This was an incredibly great act that was rewarded accordingly. Nevertheless, the Messiah came forth from two incestuous acts in the most depraved place on earth. That is where Messiah must come from. Messiah will always come from a place where it is impossible for him to be. Yet he is there.
Right. And I think that goes to show us how, even in our lowest points, no matter what we go through, and there's a lot of testimony and stories of people that really struggle with things that have happened to them that's traumatized them. And, this is just more of that picture of how Mashiach came to atone for all of that.
Right. Now, had they have waited, had they have not sinned, they would have later on, who knows what the story of Lion would have done. I mean, you know what I mean. But Isaac died at the Akedah before he had children. As we see from the Midrash and from the book of Hebrews, when we talk about basically Leviticus 29:9, when the sword touched Isaac's throat, his soul flew clean out of him. And when he lets his voice be heard from between the two cherubim, lay not thy hand from upon the lad's soul returned to his body. Then his father unbound him. And Isaac rose, knowing that in this way the dead would come back to life in the future, whereupon he began to recite, Blessed art thou, O Master, who quickens the dead. Hebrews 11:17. By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall the seed be called, accounting that Yahuwah is able to raise up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a parable.
Right.
And even the secondary source, Zohar 60a, when Isaac was sacrificed on the altar, his soul was in him in this world departed. But when it was said by Abraham, Blessed be he who quickens the dead, his soul of the world to come back to him. And we also see in Mihat Yudah by Yehuda bar Eliezer are talking about a commentary on Genesis 24:64. Says, no wonder Rebekah lost her equilibrium as she fell from her camel, for what she perceived was Isaac coming down from paradise, and he walked away, the dead walked, head down and feet up. In the Zevrashim 62:8 says, as for the temple it is well, for it is an outline was distinguishable, but how did they know? How did they know the site of the altar? They saw in a vision the altar built, and Michael the great prince standing and offering upon it. They saw Isaac's ashes lying in that place. The sight of the whole house, they smelt the odor of incense, while from there, the sight of the altar, they smelt the odor of limbs. Since Isaac died, this presents a potential problem for the Messianic line, in that he had not married and had no children. When Isaac died, all of his descendants died with him. Therefore, Jacob and his 12 sons, the tribes of Israel, all died with him. Of course, they were also resurrected with him. The pattern for Yahushua's salvation of the Gentiles is similar to Isaac's Yahushua being called by Paul the last Adam. Yahushua being the last Adam. In 1 Corinthians 15:45, this implies that Yahushua and Adam are in some way the same soul. It also implies that everyone who would ever live was the loins of Adam. When the last Adam died, all that were in his loins died with him. When the last Adam was resurrected, every soul was resurrected with him. Thus we understand that Yahushua provided the mechanism of salvation for the Gentile, the whole world, while Isaac provided the mechanism for salvation of every Yahudim. Speaking of like the binding of Isaac, a secondary source like the Zohar teaches that Isaac's soul flew from his body at the touch of the knife on his neck, and when his soul returned, he declared, "Blessed are ye who resurrects the dead." The Messianic line will always be found in impossible situations. These are the precise situations where Messiah must be found. How can death on the cross atone for sin? Yahushua was a Jewish teacher, a Jewish rabbi. He was the living Torah. He was a Torah scholar, so to speak. It is generally believed that the death of a righteous man, according to the Babylonian Talmud, atones for death. Why was the Torah portion that describes the death of Miriam just opposed to the portion dealing with the red heifer? Just as the red heifer atones for sin, so too the death of the righteous atones for sin. What kind of sin does this atone for? Well, the defilement of the altar. Why was the Torah portion that described the death of Aaron just opposed to the portion discussing the priestly garments? This teaches that just a priestly garment atones for sin, so too the death of the righteous atones for sin. Well, when you check out Numbers 20, verse 1, why is the section narrating the death of Miriam placed immediately after the section treating of the red cow? To suggest to you a comparison. Well, what is this comparison? What is the purpose of sacrifices? They affect atonement. So, too, does the death of the righteous affect atonement. It affects atonement. That's why when they didn't accept the Messiah, they didn't accept their atonement. So because of this neglect of Torah, because of this neglect of all these things, when they neglected Torah at the close of the second temple period, Yahuwah sent a righteous one whose perfect life would be atonement for the nation. Zohar explains this to you as a secondary witness. For indeed, beyond number are the chastisements awaiting every man daily for the neglect of the Torah, all the which descended into the world at the time when the Torah was given. As long as Israel were in the Holy Land, or the Kodesh land, by the means of the temple service and sacrifices, they averted all evil diseases and afflictions from the world. Now, it is the Messiah who is the means of averting them from mankind until the time when a man quits this world and receives his punishment, basically. As already said, and again, when Yahuwah desires to give healing to the world, he smites one righteous man among them with disease and suffering, and through him gives healing to all. As it is written, but he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities, and with his stripes we were healed. We are healed. Isaiah 53:5. Who is Messiah but the son of Yahuwah? Isaac's wife was barren. This is also clear issue to the messianic line. Genesis 25:21 says, and Isaac entreated Yahuwah for his wife because she was barren, and Yahuwah was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Messiah will always emerge, like I said, from the most impossible situations. So when you're looking at when we get to our fourth impossible situation, Jacob, number 4, did Jacob steal his father's blessing by deception? The appearance of theft through deception is so great that the majority of people who read this event come to the conclusion that the blessing was stolen. The forces of evil will not pay attention to folks involved in apparent impurity because they are too deceived. Thus the messianic seed will be preserved and hidden. Nevertheless, those who are discerning should be able to see, as rabbis have taught, that Jacob, our father, who was a righteous man, and that he performed the will of Yahuwah when he secured the blessings from his father, who future called Jacob, which means truth. Jacob was the foundation of truth. This suggests that Isaac gave Jacob what was rightfully his. The details of Jacob as a man of truth are presented in a study on the garment that Jacob wore when he received Isaac's blessing. It is there's a thief that does not get to keep stolen goods, basically. How much more will Yahuwah retract the blessing if the blessing is stolen? Thus, Yahuwah confirms that Yahuwah had written that Isaac confirmed that Jacob was to receive the blessing after he was aware of the deception. Genesis 27:33. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly, and said, Where is he that hath taken venison and brought it to me? And I have eaten of all before thou camest, and have blessed him. And he shall be blessed. When you get to Genesis 28:1, and Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padarium, to the house of Bethulah, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And Yahuwah Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayst be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee, and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land where thou art a stranger, which Yahuwah gave unto Abraham. So why does Jacob have 4 wives and 2 sisters when the Torah forbids this? And this is another item of apparent impurity, which causes the evil forces to suckle elsewhere, I guess. The Leviticus 18:18, Neither shalt thou take a wife to her sister to vex her, to uncover her nakedness besides the other into her lifetime. Since Torah forbids taking 2 sisters for wives, and since Leah and Rachel were sisters, surely this is a issue to the messianic line, correct? Well, the evil forces see this as an issue and will not look here. Nevertheless, it is not a problem for the messianic seed. The Torah teachers teach that the prohibition against marrying 2 sisters did not exist prior to giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, as proved by Jacob's actions. But Ezra elaborates, Ben Ezra elaborates, and Yahuwah alone plans how things work out. That Rachel died on the way as they began to enter the land. In her merit, she did not die outside Israel. And in his merit, he did not dwell in Israel, married to 2 sisters. For she was married to him in contravention of the prohibition against marrying 2 sisters. It appears that she fell pregnant with Benjamin before they reached Shemshek. Yaakov had no relations with her at all within the land because of the prohibition. This we see that this appearance of evil was sufficient to distract the evil forces without blemishing the messianic line. Now let's look at the impedance to Yaakov's wife Leah. Leah also married Yaakov by deception. Genesis 29:21. And Yaakov said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her. And Laban gathered together all the men of this place and made feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went into her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah his maid for a handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done to me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore thou hast beguiled me? Is it possible that the messianic line should be built on the deception of Leah? Leah was Yaakov's wife through deception. Yaakov was supposed to marry Rachel. But when he awoke in the morning, he found Leah. Leah was unloved, yet she bore Judah and the messianic line. Genesis 29:25. And it was in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. No, the difficulty, was she not Leah the evening before as well? Thus explains that in the evening, under the huppah, Yaakov actually thought Leah was Rachel. Yaakov and Rachel, in anticipation of Laban's treachery, devised a secret sign to allow Yaakov to disclose the deception. However, when Rachel saw her father setting up Leah in her place, she had a change of heart. My sister will be mortified. Rachel, overwhelmed by sympathy, gave the secret sign to her sister. Thus we see that the only deception came from Laban. Leah and Rachel worked together to build Israel and the messianic line. They built the messianic seed while deceiving the evil forces, the evil spiritual realm. Leah, in addition to the above deception, was barren, as we could see from the following verses in Genesis 29:31. And Yahuwah saw that Leah was hated, so he opened her womb, and Rachel was barren. The Torah teachers like to ask, why were all the matriarchs barren? Then they reply, because Yahuwah desires the prayers of the righteous. Being barren is defiant. It's a definite thing. Being barren is like basically written in stone as an impediment to producing and some sort of messianic line. The barrenness was also sufficient to deceive the evil spiritual realm, the evil forces, and allow the messianic seed to be built and constructed. And then we get to, you get to Judah. Why does Judah, the father of kings and the Messiah, visit a prostitute? Genesis 38:12. And in process of the time, the daughter of Shaul's, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shears to Manathoth, and he and his friend Hirah the Adulamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, Behold, thy father-in-law go up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned up unto her by the way, and said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me, thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give thee? And she said, Thy signet. and thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thine hand. And he gave it to her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. Thus we see Judah engaged in the mitzvah of Yibum with Tamar unknowingly. The following midrash helps to understand as a secondary source to why Judah went to a prostitute. It is said, a man should become familiar with his wife's sister and with his female relations, so as not to fall into sin through any of them. For whom do you learn this? From Judah. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot. Why so? For she had covered her face while in the father-in-law's house. Another interpretation, when Judah saw her, he paid no attention to her, but since she covered her face, he reasoned, if she was a harlot, would she actually cover her face? And then another is said, he wished to go on, but the Kodesh one, blessed be he, made a messenger who was in the charge of desire appear before him, and he said to him, whither goest thou, Judah? Whence then are kings to arise? Whence are redeemers to arise? Thereupon, and he turned unto her in despite of himself and against his wish. Tamar, why does she play a prostitute? This is clearly a way to muddy the messianic line, right? Tamar was the daughter of Shem and the prophetess in her own right. Tamar was an exceedingly great individual. She engaged in the mitzvah of the Levite marriage, I guess, with Judah. Knowingly, Tamar clearly understood that this was no sin, but rather a mitzvah that built the messianic line. Debraim, or Deuteronomy 25:5. If the brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her, and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. And it shall be the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then lets his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders, and say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise up his brother's a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him, and speak unto him, and if he said to it, and said, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. Genesis 38:6. And Judah took his wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn was wicked in the sight of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, go into thy brother's wife and marry her, and raise up the seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, that he spit it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased Yahuwah. Wherefore he slew him also. Then said Judah to Tamar his daughters-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house, till Shelah my son be grown. For he said, let her adventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So you see, when Tamar finally sleeps with Judah and bears twins, she bore one for and one for Onan. A perfect outcome there. Most folks see this encounter between Tamar and Judah in Genesis 38 as a sin of immorality. Torah, on the other hand, sees this encounter as a very great mitzvah. It is a mitzvah because Tamar was a childless woman that her dead husband's family was commanded to correct. The family was required to raise up seed for the deceased on his land. When Judah failed to give his son, Shelah, to fulfill this mitzvah, Tamar enticed Judah himself to fulfill it. The Midrash records that Yahuwah sent a messenger to force Judah against his will to turn it into Tamar's tent. The angel asked Judah, "If you fail to turn to Tamar, from where will the Messiah come?"
Right.
But then we get to number 6, or Moses. Moses appeared to be a Gentile, having been raised in Pharaoh's palace, having been raised by Pharaoh's daughter, and that alone seemed like a very weird circumstance.
Yeah.
But that just leads you right to Yahusef. When Yahusef's brothers came to Egypt to buy bread, or our number 7 person, Yahusef appeared to be evil, an Egyptian official who looked to be deep in sorcery and all types of little witchcraft, and he was but who knew he was working with the Kodesh one of Israel. But when you get to Oved, Boaz, or Oved's father, was descended from the land of harlots of Judah and Tamar, the head of the Sanhedrin and the leader of his generation. Ruth visited Boaz on the threshing floor and curled up next to him, even though they were not married. When Boaz woke, she asked for sex and marriage by saying, "Spread your wings over me." This was so apparently seemingly that Boaz prayed that Yahuwah would conceal this affair by making sure that no one saw Ruth on the threshing floor. A commentary writes, based on a secondary source of the Zohar, that since this was the planting of the seeds of the Messiah, it was necessary to hide it from Hasatan, the accusing angel, the deceiver. If the accusing messenger would be aware of it, he would try to stop the marriage by voicing accusations to Yahuwah or by putting up obstacles. Therefore, it had to be performed in such a way that the accusing angel, the deceiver, the accuser, would never imagine a lofty event was happening.
Right.
Sending Russ in the middle of the night did not look like a great positive event, so the deceiver ignored it and did not stop it. This is not an easy idea to understand. After all, hiding things from the Hasatan is not like hiding things from a human being, where one can put up a good act and pretend nothing's happening. But since this idea is brought down by many of the commentators, and one should try and understand to the best of their ability. But Ruth, Oved's mother, how can a Moabite join the congregation of Israel? Further, would Yahuwah use a Gentile in the Messianic line? Deuteronomy 23:3. An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of Yahuwah. Even so, their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of Yahuwah forever. How can a descendant of incest be part of the Messianic line? Ruth married Boaz, who was a descendant of harlotry. The greatest issue, however, was the fact that Ruth was a Moabite. The oral law, or the Talmud, explains, however, as a secondary source on how it was solved. We explained this in a different podcast, but basically, it says an Ammonite or a Moabite are forbidden and they're prohibited forever. Their women, however, are permitted at once. An Egyptian and an Edomite are forbidden only until the 3rd generation, whether they are male or females. Permits their women forthwith. This law might be inferred as if the males are forbidden for all time, the females are permitted after a little bit of time. How much more should the females be permitted forthwith, where the males are forbidden until the 3rd generation only? Thus replied, if this is true, we shall accept it, but if it is only an interference, an objection can be pointed out. He replied, not so, but in fact, it is truth that I am reporting. So, whence are these laws inferred? Scripture states, when Saul saw David, go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy son liveth, O king, I cannot tell. But did he not know him? Surely it is written, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. He rather made the inquiry concerning his father, but did he not know his father? Surely it is written, and the man who was an old man in the days of Saul, stricken in the years among them, and Rab, or it might be said Raabah, stated that this referred to the father of David, Jesse, who came in with an army and went out with an army. It is this that Saul meant, whether he descended from Perez or Zerah. If he descended from Perez, he would be king, for a king breaks for himself a way, and no one can hinder him. If, however, he is descended from Zerah, he would only be an important man. What is this reason why he gave instructions that inquire being made concerning him? Because it is written, And Saul clad David with his apparel, being of the same size as his, and about Saul it is written, From his shoulders and upward he was higher than any of the people. Doeg the Edomite then said to him, Instead of inquiring whether he is fit to be king or not, inquire whether he is permitted to enter the assembly or not. What is the reason? Because he is descended from Ruth the Moabitess, said Abner to him. We learned an Ammonite, but not an Ammonitess, a Moabite, but not a Moabitess. But in that case, a bastard would imply, but not a female bastard. It is written, which implies any one objectable. Does then the Egyptian exclude the Egyptian woman? Here it is different, since the reason for the scriptural text is explicitly stated. Because they met you not with bread and with water, it is customary for a man to meet wayfarers. It is not, however, customary for a woman to meet wayfarers. Like I said, you remember when we talked about that podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Thus we learned that Moabites were excluded, but not Moabitess. This point is so important and is so severe that even David, 3 generations later, had to deal with this issue. Thus we find that the Messiah and his line is found in very impossible situations. His line will be mirrored in apparent impurity.
Right.
The appearance of impurity, but not impurity. The appearance of impurity.
Right.
So, Yasha, why did he divorce his wife Nitzavit? Was David a mamzer, an illegitimate son? Nitzavit, mother of David, the Psalm 69 says, Save me, O Yahuwah, for the waters threaten to engulf me. I am wearied by my calling out, and my throat is dry. I've lost hope in waiting, for numerous than the hairs on my head are those who hate me without reason.
Right.
Must I then repay what I have not stolen? Mighty are those who would cut me down, whom are my enemies without cause. O Yahuwah, you know my folly, and my unintended wrongs are not hidden from you. It is for your sake that I have borne disgrace, that humiliation covers my face. I have become a stranger to my brothers and alien to my mother's sons. Out of envy for your house they ravaged me. The disgraces of those who reviled you have fallen upon me. Those who sit by the gate talk about me. Excuse me. And I am the taunt of drunkards. Disgrace breaks my heart, and I am left deathly sick. I hope for solace, but there is none, and for someone to comfort me, but I find no one. They put gall into my meal and give me vinegar to quench my thirst.
Wow. That's so prophetic.
Yeah, I mean,
the vinegar on the cross, like, really?
Yeah, and this psalm describes the life of a poor person, poor people, despised and lowly individual who lacks even a single friend to comfort him.
Right, and even if you were, not necessarily poor poverty wise. Like, you could be in a rich, quote unquote, household that their parents make a bunch of money, but like those parents aren't there, you know? So then, you know, this child is just being alone as well.
Right.
You know, it's really sad.
Absolutely.
And it really points to the importance of being in that covenant relationship with Mashiach and the Father, because no matter what, they never leave or forsake us.
Right. Right. It's the voice of a tormented soul who has experienced untold humiliation and disgrace. Through no apparent cause of his own, he is surrounded by enemies who wish to cut him down. Even his own brothers are strangers to him, ravaging and reviling him. Amazingly, this is the voice of the mighty King David, righteous and beloved servant of Yahuwah, feared and awed by all. King David had many challenges throughout his life, but at what point did this great individual feel so alone, so disgraced, and so undeserving of love and friendship? What caused King David to face such an intense situation, to be shunned by his own brothers in his home, or how he says, I have become a stranger to my brothers, by the Torah teachers who sat in judgment at the gates, or those who sit by the gate talk about him, and by the drunkards on the street corners, or I am the taunt of drunkards? What had King David done to arouse such contempt? And was there no one at this time in his life who would provide him with love, comfort, and friendship?
Right.
This psalm, in which King David passionately gives voice to the heaviest burdens of his soul, refers to a period of 28 years, from his earliest childhood until his being crowned as king of the peoples of Israel by the prophet Samuel. David was born into the family of Jesse, and that's, you know, who served as the head of the Sanhedrin, Supreme Court of Torah, and was the one of the most distinguished leaders of his generation. Jesse was a man of such greatness that the Talmud actually observes that Jesse was one of the only 4 righteous individuals who died solely due to their indignation of the serpent, i.e., only because death was decreed upon the human race when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge at the serpent's enticing, not due to any sin or flaw of his own. David was the youngest in his family, which included 7 others of his charismatic brothers. Yet, when David was born, the prominent family greeted his birth with utter contempt. As David describes quite literally in the Psalms, I was a stranger to my brothers, a foreigner to my mother's sons. They put gall in my meal and gave me vinegar to quench my thirst. David was not permitted to eat with the rest of his family, but was assigned to a separate table in the corner. He was given the task of shepherd because they hoped that a wild beast would come after him and kill him while he was performing his duties, and for this reason was sent to pasture in dangerous areas full of lions and bears. Only one individual throughout David's youth was pained by his unjustified flight and felt a deep unconditional bond of love for the child whom she alone knew was undoubtedly pure. This was King David's mother, Nitzivet, who felt the intensity of her youngest child's pain and rejection as her own. Torn and anguished by David's unwarranted degradation, yet powerless to stop it, his mother stood by the sidelines in solidarity with him, shunned herself as she too cried rivers of tears, awaiting the time when justice would be served. It would take 28 long years of assault and rejection, suffering and degradation until the justice would finally begin to materialize. So why was David's birth? Why was the young David so reviled against by his brother and people. Well, to understand the hatred directed towards David, we need to investigate the inner workings behind the events, the secret episodes that aren't recorded, the secret situations that are not told. David's father, Jesse, was the grandson of Boaz and Ruth. After several years of marriage to his wife, David's mother, after having raised several virtuous children, really successful, Jesse began to entertain personal doubts about his ancestry. True, Boaz was the leading Torah authority in his day, but his grandmother Ruth was a convert from the nation of Moab, as related in the book of Ruth. During Ruth's lifetime, many individuals were doubtful about the legitimacy of her marriage to Boaz. The Torah specifically forbids an Israelite to marry a Moabite convert, since this is the nation that cruelly refused the Yahudim people passage through their land or food and drink to purchase when they wandered in the desert after being freed from Egypt. Boaz and the teachers understood this law as per the classical interpretation transmitted in the Talmud as forbidding the conversion of the male Moabites, who were the ones responsible for the cruel conduct, while exempting female Moabite converts. With his marriage to Ruth, Boaz hoped to clarify and publicize this Torah law, which was still unknown to the masses. Boaz died the night after his marriage with Ruth. Ruth had conceived and gave birth to their son, Oved, the father of Jesse. Some critics at the time claimed that Boaz's death verified that his marriage to Ruth, the Moabite, had indeed been forbidden. Time would prove differently once Oved, called so because he was the true Oved, or the true servant of Yahuwah, and later Jesse and his offspring were born. Their righteous conduct and their prestigious position proved the legitimacy of their ancestors. It was unquestionable that the man of such caliber could have descended from a forbidden union. However, later in his life, doubt gripped Jesse's heart, gnawing away at the very foundation of his existence. Being the sincere individual that he was, his integrity compelled him to action. If Jesse's status was in question, he was not permitted to remain married to his wife, a veritable Israelite. Disregarding the personal sacrifice, Jesse decided the only solution would be to separate from her, but no longer engaging in marital relations. Jesse's children were aware of this separation. After a number of years had passed, Jesse longed for an offspring whose ancestry would be unquestionable. His plan was to engage in relations with his Canaanite maidservant. He said to her, I will be freeing you conditionally if my status as a Yahudim is legitimate. Then are free as a proper Yahudim convert to marry me. If my status, however, is blemished, and I have the legal status of a Moabite convert forbidden to marry an Israelite, I am not giving you your freedom. But as a Canaanite manservant, you may marry a Moabite convert. The maidservant was aware of this anguish of her mistress, David's mother. She understood her pain in being separated from her husband for so many years. She knew as well as David's mother the longing for more children. The empathetic maidservant secretly approached David's mother and informed her of Jesse's plan, suggesting a bold counterplan. Let us learn from your ancestors and replicate their actions. Switch places with me tonight, just as Leah did with Rachel.
Yeah.
She advised, with a prayer on her lips, that her plan succeeds. David's mother took the place of her maidservant. That night, she conceived. Jesse remained unaware of the switch. After 3 months, David's mother's pregnancy became very obvious.
Wow.
Her sons wished to kill their apparent adulterous mother and the illegitimate fetus that she carried. David's mother, for her part, would not embarrass her husband by revealing the truth of what she'd done, like her ancestors Tamar, who was prepared to be buried alive rather than embarrass Judah. David's mother chose a vow of silence, and like Tamar, David's mother would be rewarded for her silence with a child of greatness who would be the forebearer of the Messiah.
Amen.
So now we know why King David used these words in Psalms. I was conceived in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me.
Right.
Unaware of the truth behind his wife's pregnancy, but having compassion on her, Jesse ordered his sons not to touch her. Do not kill her. Instead, let the child that will be born be treated as a lowly and despised servant. In this way, everyone will realize that his status is questionable, and an illegitimate child he will not marry, an Israelite. From the time from his birth onwards, David's mother's son, was treated by his brothers as an abomination and an outcast. Nothing the conduct of his brothers, the rest of the community assumed that this youth was a treacherous sinner full of unspeakable guilt. On the infrequent occasions David's son would return from the pastures to his home in Bethlehem, he was shunned by the townspeople. If something was lost or stolen, he was accused as the natural culprit and ordered, in the words of Psalms, to repay what I have not stolen. Eventually, the entire lineage of Jesse was questioned, as well as the basis of the original law of the Moabite convert. People claim that all the positive qualities from Boaz became manifest in Jesse and his illustrious 7 sons, while all the negative character traits from Ruth the Moabite clung to this despicable youngest son. But we need to understand King David's coronation. We are first introduced to David when the prophet Samuel was commanded to go to coronate a new king to replace the rejected King Saul. Samuel arrives in Bethlehem, and the elders of the city come out to greet him. Nervous at this unusual and unexpected visit, since the elderly prophet had stopped circulating through the land, the elders feared that Samuel had heard about the grievous sin that was taking place in their city. Perhaps he had come to rebuke them over the behavior of Jesse's despised shepherd boy living in their midst. Samuel declared, however, that he had come in place and asked the elders and Jesse and his sons to join him for a sacrificial feast. As an elder, Jesse was invited to the feast, but when his sons were invited, they worried that perhaps the prophet had come to publicly reveal the embarrassment and illegitimate origins of their brother. Unbeknownst to them, Samuel would anoint the new king of Israel at the feast. All that had been revealed to the prophet at this point was that the new king would be a son of Jesse. When they came, Samuel saw, it looks like Eli, Jesse's older son, and he thought, surely Yahuwah's anointing stands before him. But Yahuwah said to Samuel, don't look at the appearance of his greatest height, for I have rejected him. Yahuwah does not see with mere eyes like a man does. Yahuwah sees the heart. Then Jesse called his second son and made him pass before Samuel. He said, Yahuwah did not choose this one either. Jesse made Shammah pass, and Samuel said, Yahuwah has not chosen this one either. Jesse had his 7 sons pass before Samuel. Samuel said to Jesse, Yahuwah has not chosen any of them. At last Samuel said to Jesse, are there no lads remaining? And he answered, a small one is left. He is taking care of the sheep. So Samuel said to him, send forth him and have him brought. We will not stir until he comes here. So he sent for him and had him brought. He was of ruddy complexion with red hair, beautiful eyes, and handsome to look at. Yahuwah said, "Rise up, anoint him, for this is the one, the small one left behind." As Samuel laid his eyes on Jesse's eldest son, Eliab, he was certain that this was the future king of Israel. Tall, handsome, and distinguished, Samuel was ready to anoint him until Yahuwah reprimanded him not to look at the outside but to the inside. No longer did Samuel make any assumptions of his own, but he waited to be told who was to become the next king. All the 7 sons of Jesse had passed before Samuel, and none of them had been chosen. "Are these all the lads?" Samuel asked. Samuel prophetically chose his words carefully. He had asked if they were all Jesse's sons. Jesse would have answered affirmatively that there were no more of his sons. Since David was not given the status of a son, instead Jesse answered, "A small one is left. He is taking care of the sheep." David's status was small in Jesse's eyes. He was hoping that Samuel would proceed and allow David to remain where he was, outside of trouble, tending to the sheep in the faraway pastures. But Samuel ordered that David immediately be summoned to the feast. A messenger was dispatched to David, whom, out of respect for the prophet, first went to wash himself and change his clothes. Unaccustomed to seeing David home at such a time, David's mother inquired about it. "Why did you come home in the middle of the day?" David explained the reason and said, "If so, I too am accompanying you." As David arrived, Samuel saw a man of ruddy complexion with red hair, beautiful eyes, and handsome to look at. David's physical appearance alludes to the different aspects of his personality. His ruddiness suggests a warlike nature, while his eyes and general appearance indicate kindness and gentility. At first, Samuel doubted whether David would be the worthy one of the kingship, a forerunner of the dynasty that would lead the Yahudim people to the end of time. He thought to himself, "This one will shed blood as did the red-headed Esau." Yahuwah said, however, that David's greatness was that he would direct his aggressiveness towards positive aims. Yahuwah said, "Samuel, my anointed one is standing before you, and you remain seated. Arise and anoint David without delay, for he is the one I have chosen." As Samuel held the horn of oil, it bubbled as if it could not wait to drop out of David's forehead. When Samuel anointed him, the oil hardened and glistened like pearls and precious stones, and the horn remained full. As Samuel anointed David, the sound of weeping could be heard from outside the great hall. It was the voice of David's mother, David's lone supporter, and his sole source of comfort. Her 28 years of silence and the fact of humiliation were finally coming to a close. At last, all would see that the lineage of her youngest son was pure, undefiled by any blemish. Finally, the anguish and humiliation that she and her son had bore would come to an end. Facing her other sons, David's mother explained, "The stone that was reviled by the builders has now become the cornerstone." Humbled, they responded, "This has come from Yahuwah. It was hidden from our eyes." Those in the hall cried out in unison, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Within moments, the once reviled shepherd boy became the anointed future king of Israel. So, David's mother's legacy, or King David, would have many more trials to face until he was acknowledged by the entire nation as the new monarch to replace King Saul. During his kingship and throughout his life until his old age, King David faced many ordeals. King David possessed many great talents and qualities which assisted him in attaining the tremendous achievements of his lifetime. Many of those positive qualities were inherited from his father, Jesse, after whom he is fondly and respectively called Ben Jesse, the son of, or basically the son of Jesse. But it was undoubtedly from his mother that the young David bless you, absorbed the fortitude and courage to face his adversaries from the moment he was born. And during his most tender years, it was David's mother who, by example, taught him the essential lesson of valuing every individual's dignity and refraining from embarrassing anyone, regardless of their personal consequences. It was she who displayed a silent but courageous bravery and dignity in the face of the gravest hardship. It is from David's mother that King David absorbed a strength born from an inner confidence to disregard the callous treatment of the world and find solace in the comfort of one's Maker. It was this strength that would fortify King David to defeat his enemies and his most treacherous adversaries, and he valiantly fought against the mightiest warriors on behalf of his people, on behalf of the Yahudim. David's mother taught her young child David to find the strength in following the path of one's inner convictions, irrespective of the cruelty that might be hurled on top of him. Her display of patient confidence in the Creator, Yahuwah, that justice would be served, gave David the inner peace and solace that he would need over and over again in confronting these challenges in his life. Rather than succumbing to his afflictions, rather than become the individual who was shunned by his tormentors, David learned from his mother to stand proud and dignified, feeling consolate in the open pastures and communicating with his Maker Yahuwah. She demonstrated to him as well the need of boldness while pursuing the right path. While the situation would call for it, personal risk must be taken. Without her bold actions and taking the place of her maidservant that faithful night, the great soul of her youngest child, David, the forebearer of Messiah, would never have descended into this world. The soul-stirring psalms composed by King David in his greatest hour of need eloquently describe his suffering and heartache, as well as his faith and conviction. The book of Psalms gives a voice to each of us, and has become the balm to soothe all of our wounds. As we too encounter the many personal and communal hardships of life in our scattered across the nations while we're in exile, as we see these rushes, our voices mesh with David's mother, with King David, and with all the voices of those past and present who have experienced unjustified pain in beseeching our Maker for that time when the Son of David will usher in the era of redemption, and true justice will suffice for creation. Thus, we see that the Messianic line was hidden from all the evil spiritual forces in the world because it was mirrored in the apparent immorality of sin when it had no sin.
Right.
It seemed it had sin, but it had no sin. In order to trick the one and only Hasatan from being able to destroy the Messianic line, in order to save us from all hell. When we're talking about David, I mean, you can't help to ask the question, was Solomon born to an adulterer and a murderer? Well, David himself was thought to be a very impure person who was ostracized and sent to watch sheep to avoid contact with his folks. As a shepherd, he learned how to be basically the role model for the Messiah. Bathsheba was David's paramour, and she was already married to Uriah the Hittite, how can we be sure that Solomon was not Uriah's child? Well, 2 Samuel 11:3 says, And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? In 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12, we find the story. We find this story to examine, and in this story, many folks see King David lusting after Bathsheba, the wife of Uri the Hittite. Uri is a soldier in King David's army. He is fighting the king's battle when King David takes his wife in an adulterous relationship. After she becomes pregnant, King David has Uriah recalled from the battle and orders him to sleep with his wife in order to cover up his sin. Afterwards, when Uriah refuses to sleep with Bathsheba, King David has Uriah killed. Excuse me. As King David, Uriah killed in battle. After Uriah's death, King David marries Bathsheba. Most folks understand that King David committed adultery and murder. These are the sins that they see King David committing. These apparent sins serve to discourage the evil forces, so to speak, and hide the Messiah in another impossible situation. Does King David commit adultery and murder? Well, if we apply the principle of I may be saying it incorrectly, but it's basically measure for measure, we get an entirely different picture. Furthermore, if we examine the rabbis, we see that there is more to the story than meets the eye. Was King David committing adultery? Well, the Tanakh says no. Nathan the prophet accused King David of theft. Did King David commit murder? The Tanakh says no. How can this be? Well, the rabbis record that King David required that all of his soldiers were required to give their wives get a divorce before they went off to battle. This was done so that if a soldier failed to return from the battle and his body was not found, then his wife would not become a woman who could not remarry. If she was legally divorced, then she could remarry if her husband did not return after a reasonable amount of time. And let's see, it says right here, everyone who goes out into war of the house of David writes for his wife a deed of divorce, for it is written, and to thy brethren shalt thou bring greetings and take their pledge. What is the meaning of and take their pledge? Things which are pledged between him and her. Therefore we know that Uriah has given his wife a get and was legally divorced. Therefore we know that King David did not commit adultery. We can know that King David did not commit adultery because the Torah prescribes that one who commits adultery is to be stoned to death. Leviticus 20:10. And the man that committed adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and adulteress, shall surely be put to death. Since Yahuwah did not cause this to happen, we know that King David did not commit adultery. Did King David lust sexually after Bathsheba? No. King David did not lust after her. He had entirely conquered that evil inclination. The story makes it sound like Bathsheba was taking a bath on her roof without any covering. Nothing could be further from the truth. Bathsheba was coming out from the mikveh, the ritual baptism that women must immerse in every month. As she exited that baptism house, her exalted spiritual state attracted King David. He prophetically saw that he was to father Solomon with this woman. This is why he took her. The Zohar, as a second witness, says, beginning with the verses, for I know my transgressions and my sin is ever before me, he said, how much must a man be on his guard against sinning before the Kodesh one? Blessed be he, for each sin committed by man is recorded on high, and is not blotted out, save by much repentance. As it is said, For those that wash thee with nitre, and take thee much soap, yet thine iniquity is marked before me. This is Jeremiah 11. For when a man commits a sin once before Yahuwah, it leaves a mark. And when he repeats the same sin, that mark is deepened. And after a third time, it becomes a stain spreading from one side to another, as expressed in the words, Thine iniquity is become a stain before me. When David committed his great sin in taking Bathsheba, he thought that it would leave its mark forever, but the message came to him, Yahuwah also has put away thy sin, thou shalt not die. The stain has been removed, but since we have been taught that Bathsheba was destined for the King David from the day of creation, how come it that Kodesh one, blessed be him, first gave her to Uriah the Hittite? Well, such is the way of the Kodesh one, blessed be he. Although a woman is destined for a certain man, he first allows her to be the wife of another man until his time arrives. Also, soon as that time arrives, he departs from the world to make way for the other. Although the Kodesh one, blessed be him, is loath to remove him from the world to make way for the other man before his time arrives, this is the inner reason why Bathsheba was given to Uriah first. Now reflect, and you will find the reason for the Kodesh land having been given to Canaan before Israel came there. You will find that the inner reason underlying the two is the same. Observe further that David, although he confessed his sin and repented, could not obliterate from his heart and mind the memory of the sins that he committed, especially of that concerning Bathsheba, and he was always apprehensive lest one of them would prove a stumbling block to him in the hour of danger. Hence he never removed them from his thoughts. According to another interpretation, the words, "For I know my transgressions," indicate his knowledge of the diverse grades to which the various sins of man are to be referred, while the words, "and my sin," or my failing, refers to the defect of the moon, which did not emerge from her impurity until the time of Solomon, when her light once more became whole, so that the world became firmly established and Israel dwelt secure, as it is written, "And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree." This is 1 Kings, verse 5. Nevertheless, and David said, "My deficiency is ever before me, and that will not be obliterated from the world until the Messiah will come. As it is said, and the unclean spirit I will cause to pass out from the earth." Zechariah, 13:2. In fact, the Torah teachers teach that King David has asked Yahuwah for a test in this area because he had completely conquered this inclination. The Zohar opens up in a secondary witness. David further says, "The Yahuwah, sovereign of the universe, wherefore do not the Israelites conclude one of their blessings with my name, as they do with the name of Abraham, of whom it is written, I am thy shield?" Yahuwah replied, "Abraham I have already tried and tested and found to be steadfast." Said David, "If so, examine me, O Yahuwah, and prove me, try my reins and my heart." When he sinned in the matter of Bathsheba, David remembered what he had said, and he explained, "Thou hast proved mine heart, thou hast visited me in the night, thou hast tried me, and hast not found my thoughts should not have passed my mouth. I said, examine me, Yahuwah, and prove me that thou hast proved my heart. I said, try my reins, and thou hast tried me, but thou hast not found me, and I should be. With that what was in my mind that had not passed my lips." And with all this, the Israelites do not conclude a blessing with his name. The third blessing after the Haftarah. Therefore David said, "Yahuwah art a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. The great assuredly is my glory, with which I am groaned." Did David cause the murder of this Hittite soldier? The Tanakh says no. But how can this be? To understand this part, we must look carefully at the next and understand what's really going on. In 2 Samuel 11, verse 8, and David said to Uriah, go down to thy house, and wash thy feet. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a mess of meat from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his master, and went not down to his house. Notice that Uriah disobeyed a direct order of the king, so King David gives him a second chance in 2 Samuel 11:10. And when they had told David, saying, Uriah went not down unto his house, David said to Uriah, camest thou not from thy journey? Why then didst thou not go down unto thine house? And Uriah said to David, the ark, and Israel and Judah abide in tents, and my master Joab and the servants of my master are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into mine house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As thou livest and thou soul liveth, I will not do this thing. And David said to Uriah, tarry here today also, and tomorrow I will let thee depart. And so Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and the morrow. And when David had called him, he did eat and drink before him, and he made him drunk. And even as he went to lie on his bed with the servants of his master, but went not down to his house. So at this point, King David had no choice. Uriah had disobeyed a direct order of the king. The penalty for this offense is death. 2 Samuel 11:14. And it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab, and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote the letter, saying, set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. And it came to pass when Joab was over the city, that he assigned Uriah into a place where he knew that valiant men were. And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab, and there fell some of the people of the servants of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also. King David knows that Uriah has a good heart. Nevertheless, one must obey the king no matter what. No, not wishing to publicly shame, King David has him killed in battle in an honorable manner. Notice that Joab does not protest in the least. Joab knew that the order of the king as the chief justice must be obeyed. So now we know that King David did not commit adultery with Bathsheba, and that he did not cause Uriah to be murdered. What we need to know is, what was King David's sin? Yahuwah's punishments are always just to determine the sin. We should look at the punishment. 2 Samuel 11:26. And when the wife of Jehoram heard that Jehoram her husband was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when the morning was fast, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife, and bare him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased Yahuwah. And Yahuwah sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him, and said unto him, there were two men in the city, the one rich and the one poor. The rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, save one little lamb, which he had bought and nourished, and grew it up together with him, and with his children. It did not eat of his own meat, and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveller unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock, and of his own herd, to dress for the wayfaring man that was come unto him, but took the poor man's lamb, and dressed it for the land that was come to him. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and said to Nathan, as Yahuwah liveth, the man that had done this thing shall surely die, and he shall surely restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. King David was also the chief judge. Nathan the prophet naturally came to the king for a judgment. David, being a great Torah scholar and rabbi, renders a judgment in keeping with Torah. Yahuwah agreed to this judgment except for the death penalty. 2 Samuel 12:13. And David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against Yahuwah. And Nathan said unto David, Yahuwah also hath put away thy sin, thou shalt not die. The bottom line is this. Yahuwah has accused King David of stealing a female sheep. The penalty is therefore in keeping with the sin. Exodus 22:1. A man shall steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it. He shall restore 5 ox for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Therefore, King David's sin was theft of a sheep. Now that we have seen the picture, we can begin to understand why Yahuwah said that David was a man after his own heart. In Acts 32:22, and when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. Yahuwah shall never say this about an adulterous murderer. Whoever says that David sinned is merely an error. For it is said, David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and Yahuwah was with him. It is possible that sin came to his hand, yet the divine presence was with him. Then how do I interpret, wherefore hast thou despised the word of Yahuwah? To do that which is evil in his sight is he wished to do evil, but did not. Rabbi, who is descended from David, seeks to defend him and expounds the verse in David's favor. Thus, the evil mentioned here is unlike every other evil mentioned elsewhere in Torah. For of every other evil mentioned in Torah it is written, and he did. Whereas here it is written to do. This means that he desires to do, but did not. But thou hast smitten Uriah the Hittite with the sword. Thou shouldst have had him tried. Thou should have had him tried by the Sanhedrin, but he did not, and he has taken his wife to be thy wife. Thou hast marriage rights in her. For everyone who went out into the wars of the house of David wrote a bill of divorcement for his wife. For it is said, and bring these 10 cheeses unto the captain for their 1,000, and look until thy brethren's fair, and take their pledge. What is it meant? The things which pledge man and women to one another. And thou hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. Just as thou art not to be punished for the sword of the Ammonites, so art thou not to be punished for the death of Uriah the Hittite. What is the reason? He was rebellious against royal authority, saying to him, and my master Joab and the servants of my master are camped in the open field, etc. How little does he whom Yahuwah supports need to grieve or trouble himself? Saul sinned once and brought calamity upon him. David sinned twice, and it did not bring evil upon him. What was the one sin of Saul? The affair with Agag. But there was also the matter with Nob, the city of the priests. Still, it was because of what happened with Agag, the scripture says, it repented me that I have set up Saul to be king. What were the 2 sins of David? The sin against Uriah, and that of counting the people to which he was enticed, but there was also the matter of Bathsheba, for that he was punished, as it is written, and he shall restore the land fourfold. The child Ammon, Tamar, and Absalom. But for the other sin he was also punished, as it is written, so Yahuwah sent a pestilence upon Israel for the morning, even to the time appointed. There his own body was not punished, but the former case to his own body was not punished either. Not indeed, he was punished on his own body, for Rab Judah said in the name of Rab, for 6 months David was smitten with leprosy. The Sanhedrin removed from him, and departed from him, as it is written, let those that fear thee return unto me, and thee that know thy testimonies. And it is also written, restore unto me the joy of thy salvation. But Rab said that David also listened to evil talk. We hold like Samuel, who says that David did not do so, and even according to Rab, who says that David listened to calamity, was he not punished for it? For Judah said in the name of Rab, at the time when David said to Mephibosheth, I say, thou and Ziba divide the land, and a heavenly voice came forth to say to him, Rehoboam and Jeroboam will divide the kingdom. Nevertheless, King David did sin grievously for a man, he in his exalted position with his exalted spiritual status. The Torah is quite blunt regarding the seriousness of King David's sins. Let's see. Second Samuel was or Samuel 12:7-13. And Nathan said to David, "Thou art the man. Thus say Yahuwah, Yahuwah of Israel. I anointed thee king of Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul, and I gave thee thy master's house and thy master's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover have given unto thee such things. Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of Yahuwah, to do evil in his sight? Thou hast killed the Hittite with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. Now therefore the sword will never be depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me, and hast taken thy wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. Thus says Yahuwah, Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with thine wives in the sight of the sons. For thou did it secretly, but I will do this in public." Publicly, people. Publicly. And it says, "For I did it in secret, for I will do this before all Israel and before the sun." And David said unto Nathan, "I have sinned against Yahuwah." And Nathan said unto David, "Yahuwah also had put away the sin. Thou shalt not die." And 1 Kings 15:4, it says, "Nevertheless, for David's sake did Yahuwah his Elohim give him a lamp in Jerusalem to set up his son after him, and to establish Jerusalem, because David did that which was right in the eyes of Yahuwah, and turned not aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, save only in the matter of the Hittite." We must be very careful not to read into the scriptures more than what we should be here. It is also instructive note that the union of King David with Bathsheba produced Solomon, the wisest man ever lived. 2 Samuel 12:24, "And David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and went unto her, and lay with her, and she bare a son, and he called his name Solomon. And Yahuwah loved him." It is apparent that King David was destined to marry Bathsheba. It seems that his timing was just a little off. So, let's assume that you have read this far and still think that King David committed adultery and murder. Consider this. Why did the prophet Nathan say that David stole a sheep? What was the point of the prophet's story? Now, because of David's greatness, his crime is dealt with in a very severe way. It is dealt with as though he committed a murder, in the same way Moses lost entry to the promised land simply by hitting a rock. Also note that the proper punishment for murder is death. David must die if he committed murder. The Torah is quite clear. Why didn't David die? The proper punishment for committing adultery is death. Why wasn't David stoned? Since when does the Torah kill my children when I have committed a capital crime? Not even men would even do this. It is confirmed in a second witness with the Talmud. Sanhedrin 10:7a says one should never intentionally bring himself to the test. Since David, king of Israel, did so and failed, he said unto him, Sovereign of the universe, why do we say in prayer the Yahuwah, or the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob, but not the Elohim of David? He replied, They were tried by me, but thou was not. Then replied he, Sovereign of the universe, examine and try me, as it is written, Examine me, O Elohim, and try me. He answered, I will test thee, and yet grant thee a special privilege, for I did not inform them of the nature of their trial beforehand. Yet I inform thee that I will try thee in a manner of adultery. Straightway, and it came to pass in an evening tide that David arose from off his bed. It changed his night cough to a day cough, but he forgot the halasha. There is a small organ in man which satisfies him in his hunger, but makes him hunger when satisfied. He walked upon the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. But as we noted earlier, she was baptizing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. Now Bathsheba was cleansing her hair behind a screen when Hasatan came to him, appearing in the shape of a bird. He shot an arrow at him, which broke the screen. Thus she stood revealed, and he saw her immediately. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, Is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her. And she came unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanliness. And she returned unto her house, that it was written, Thou hast proved mine heart, thou hast visited me in thy night, thou hast tried me, and shalt find nothing. I am purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. He said thus, Would that a bridle had fallen into the mouth of mine enemy, or i.e. himself, that I had not spoken this. What is meant by this verse is to the chief musician, a psalm of David in Yahuwah put, I trust, how say ye to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain. David pleaded before the Kodesh One, blessed he is, sovereign of the universe, forgive me that sin, that men may not say your mountain or your king had been put to flight by a bird. What is meant by this verse? Against thee, thee only, have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest. David pleaded before the Kodesh One, blessed is he. Thou knowest full well that had I wished to suppress my lust, I could have done so, but though I let them, the people, not say, the servant triumphed against his master. What does this mean? For I am ready to halt, and my sorrow is continually before me. Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, was predestined for David from the 6 days of creation. But that she came to him with sorrow, and the school of Ishmael teach, likewise, that she was worthy or predestined for David from the 6 days of creation, but that he enjoyed her before she was right. Psalms 51 verse 2 says, Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin, for I acknowledge my transgression, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee, thee only, have I sinned, and done this evil in my sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when judging. I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Thus we see the Messianic line immersed in an apparent immorality situation, which presented another apparent impossible situation, which is going to lead me into Rehoboam. What was Rehoboam a mamzer because Nehemiah was an Ammonite? Well, 1 Kings 14:21 tells us that Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old, and he began to reign, and he reigned 70 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahuwah did chose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Nehemiah Amminadab. She was Rehoboam's mother and a descendant of Ammon. How can a descendant of incest be part of the Messianic line, especially given that she is a Gentile? Furthermore, would Yahuwah use a Gentile Ammonite in the Messianic line, especially when the Torah makes it explicit that an Ammonite cannot enter the congregation of Israel? Well, Deuteronomy 23:3, the Ammonite or the Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of Yahuwah. Even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of Yahuwah or forever. We've already shown how the Torah forbade the Ammonites, but did not the Ammonites, but did not forbid the Ammonites. Nevertheless, the significant issue was sufficient to distract the evil forces and allow the Messiah to emerge from another impossible situation. But what about Coniah? Does his curse prelude a messianic descendant? Let's look at the first curse from Yahuwah, which makes Jeconiah, Elias, Coniah, an unalike part of the messianic line. Well, when you look at Jeremiah 20:24, as I live, saith Yahuwah, through the Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet upon my right hand. Yet would I pluck thee thence, and will give thee into the hand of them that seek thy life, and into the hand of them whose face thou fearest, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. And I will cast thee out, and thy mother that bare thee, into another country, where ye not born, and there shall ye die. But to the land whereunto they desire to return, whether shall they not return? Is this man Coniah and despised broken idol? Is he a vessel wherein is no pleasure? Wherefore are they cast out? He and his seed are cast into a land which they know not. O earth, hear the word of Yahuwah. Thus say Yahuwah, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon their throne of David, and ruling any more in Judah. The easiest answer to this curse is the following passage in Haggai 2:23, which also uses a signet ring to connect the curse to its solution. It says, in that day, Yahuwah of hosts, will I take Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, says Yahuwah, and will make thee a signet ring, for I have chosen thee, says Yahuwah of hosts. To further clarify this issue, we have a secondary source in the Talmud that treats this curse, which says, exile atones for everything, for it is written, thus says Yahuwah, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David, and ruling any more in Judah. Whereas after the king was exiled, it is written, and the sons of Jeconiah, the same as Asher, Shealtiel, his son, etc., he was called Asher, because his mother conceived him in prison. Shealtiel, because Yahuwah did not plant him in the way that others are planted. We know by tradition that a woman cannot conceive in a standing position. Yet Sheol did conceive standing. Another interpretation, Shealtiel, because Yahuwah obtained of the heavenly court absolution from his oath. Zerubbabel was also called because he was sown in Babylon. But his real name was Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. This is the death blow to the curse. Numerous places in the Talmud note that the curse was annulled because of teshuvah. Now they made the calf, this is talking about Numbers 20:20, and deserved to be exterminated, and would have thought that he would curse and destroy them. Yet no sooner had they repented than the danger was averted, and Yahuwah repented of the evil. And so in many places, for example, he said about, for no man of his seed shall prosper, and it says, I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kings of the nations. In the day, says Yahuwah of hosts, will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith Yahuwah, and will make thee a signet. Thus was annulled that which he said to his forefather, as I live, saith Yahuwah, through Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, wear the signet upon my right hand. Yet I would pluck thee thence. It was the same with the men of Ananiah. There shall be no remnant unto them. Yet because they repented, he preserved them, as it is written, the men of Anoth 128. Balaam said, he does not look upon their transgressions and only considers their merits. And then another secondary source that deals with this curse talks about how it argued as follows: repentance set aside the entire decree, and a prayer half the decree. You will find that it was so with Jeshoniah, king of Judah, for the Kodesh one, blessed be he, swore in his anger, as I live, saith Yahuwah, to Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, where the signet of a hand, yet my right know that it was by his right hand that Yahuwah swore, I would pluck thee hence. And what was decreed against them? That he dies childless. And it said, write ye this man childless. But as soon as he is avowed penitence, the Kodesh one, blessed be he, sets aside the decree, as is shown by scriptures reference to this, to the sons, the same as Aser. And scripture says, furthermore, in that day will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and will make thee a signet. Behold then how penitence can set aside the entire decree. And the Yehudim Encyclopedia says, not only was the curse annulled and the sin forgiven, but that Jeconiah merited to become the ancestor of the Messiah. Jehonaiah's sad experience changed his nature entirely. And as he repented of the sins which he had committed as king, he was pardoned by Yahuwah, who revoked the decree to the effect that none of his descendants should ever become king. He even became the ancestor of the Messiah. The curse follows the well-established path of the Messianic line. The Messiah is hidden in an obvious, impossible situation, only to rise triumphant from the quagmire and emerge spotless, having turned the situation completely upside down. Now, we get into the matter of Yahushua. Does a virgin birth preclude the throne of David? Is Yahushua Yahuwah? Is Yahushua part of some sort of trinity? Did Yahuwah spurn the Torah? Why don't Yahudim believe in him? Obvious, it is a serious issue to the Messiah if he is not accepted by the Yahudim people. But further, why are his parents very poor while previous ancestors in the Messianic line having been kings and leaders of their generations? There are some of the questions that have been asked by unlearned skeptics through the centuries. They are questions which call into question the Messianic aspirations of Yahushua. These are all clear issues to the Messianic line, but let's begin the research by examining the text which speaks of Yahushua's birth. In Matthew 1:18. Now the birth of Yahushua the Messiah was on this wise, when as his mother Mary was espoused to Yahusef, before they came together, she was found with child of the Ruach HaKodesh. Then Yahusef, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make a public example, was minded to put her away privately. But while he thought of these things, behold, the messenger of Yahuwah appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Yahusef, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Ruach HaKodesh. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yahushua, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now all this was done, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of Yahuwah by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is Yahuwah with us. Then Yahusef, being raised from sleep, did as the messenger of Yahuwah had bidden him, and took unto him his wife, and knew her not until she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called her his name Yahushua. Now when Yahushua was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born of king of the Yahudim? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all the Jerusalem with him. And when he gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Messiah should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, art not the least among the priests of Judah? For out of the small, out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. And when they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with the exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of Yahuwah in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed in their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the messenger of Yahuwah appeared to Yahuseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word from Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed in Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Yahuwah by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And there was a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. But when Herod was dead, behold, a messenger of Yahuwah appeareth into the dream of Yahuseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judah in the room of his father's Herod, he was afraid to go there. Notwithstanding, being warned of Yahuwah in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee, and he came and dwelt in the city of Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, He shall be called a Nazarene. Luke 2:1. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all in the world should be taxed. And this taxing was made first when Cyrenius was a governor of Syria, and all went to be taxed, everyone in his own city. And Yahuseph also went up to Galilee, and out of the city of Nazareth into Judah, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there, in the same country, shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the messenger of Yahuwah came upon them, and glory of Yahuwah shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the messenger said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, where Messiah Yahuwah, and this shall be a sign unto you. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the messenger a multitude of heavenly hosts, praying Yahuwah, and saying, Glory to Yahuwah in the highest, and earth peace, good will towards men. And it came to pass, as the messengers were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see these things which is come to pass, which Yahuwah hath made known unto us. And they came in without haste, and found Mary and Yahuseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they had heard, and wondered at these things that were told to them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things, and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising Yahuwah for all these things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them. See, Christians claim a virgin birth. This claim preludes any messianic possibility because the messianic cannot inherit the throne of David unless his blood descendant through Yahusef, his father. The Messiah must be descended on his father's side from King David. Well, Genesis 49:10 says the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and until him shall the gathering of the people be. Isaiah 11:1 tells us, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. So, according to the Christian claim that Yahushua was the product of a virgin birth, he had no father, and thus could not be possibly fulfilled the messianic requirement of being descendant of his father's side from King David. This virgin birth was so thoroughly confused the messianic hope that there will not be a single learned Yahudim who would entertain this idea. See, they discredit this because they refer to Yahushua specifically as the son of Yahusef. And John 6:42 says, has the townspeople asked, is this not Yahushua, the son of Yahusef, whose father and mother was known? Romans 1:1 says, he writes, Paul, a servant of Yahushua, called to be an apostle and separated on the gospel of concerning his son Yahushua, Messiah our Master, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh. But see, we have the possibility that his birth was the result of unprotected sex, because the text explicitly says that Miriam became pregnant before she married Yahusef. Further, it also is conceivable that she was too young to have her first period when she became pregnant. Yet, we see that Yahushua was born unto a Virgin Mary, and not to the leaders of the generation, or to a king, but rather to poor, Yahuli, believing parents. There is no hope of an inheritance, and therefore there is every expectation that Yahushua will be poor, like his parents. There is also the aspect that any son of David with a messianic expectation was a sure target by Herod. For death, after all, Herod killed every infant in Bethlehem, or on declaration by a few, that the Messiah had been born. But we know he's a suffering servant, but he's also the conquering king. Yahushua is the conquering king. The apostles, who are all Yahudim, were constantly wanting to know when Yahushua would reveal himself as the Messiah ben David. No one wanted the Messiah ben Yahusef. They wanted to be delivered from their foes and to be part of the Messianic kingdom. Yahushua as Messiah ben Yahusef was the exact opposite of what the Yahudim were expecting. This alone was sufficient to render Yahushua invisible to learned Yahudim. But this desire for Messiah has led many learned Yahudim to reject Yahushua. And why? For the following reason. If Yahushua had indeed been the Messiah ben David, he would have fulfilled the messianic prophecies mentioned in the Tanakh. For instance, the Messiah ben David will bring about universal peace and tranquility. Isaiah 2:4, and they shall beat their swords in plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. The Messiah ben David will bring about universal respect for Yahuwah and lead all people to follow his ways. Isaiah 11:9, the knowledge of Yahuwah will fill the earth. The world will be filled with the knowledge of Yahuwah as the water covered the sea. The Messiah ben David will cause an ingathering of Yahudim, exiles. This is proved in Micah 5:2. Then the residue of his brethren shall return with the children of Israel. The Messiah ben David will bring about the rebuilding of the temple. Zechariah 6:12. Speak unto him, saying, Thus speaketh Yahuwah of hosts, saying, Behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of this place, and he shall build the temple of Yahuwah. The Messiah ben David will also bring physical cure to all those who are sick. Isaiah 35:5. Then the eye of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. Then the lame man will leap as a hart, and the tongue of the dumb will sing. Furthermore, the Messiah ben David will accomplish these tasks within his own lifetime. Isaiah 42:4. He shall not fail nor be discouraged till he has sent judgment into the earth, and the isles shall wait for his law. Thus, Yahudim are looking for Messiah bin David, and this totally obscures the reality of Messiah bin Yahusef. Another attempt to discourage any Messiah hopes was to make Yahuwah into three persons instead of being one, or Echad, one. If Yahushua was part of a Yahuwah Godhead of three persons, then there could never be a hope that he would be accepted to the Yahudim who proclaim Shema twice each day. The Trinity is a idolatrous concept that makes Yahushua anathema to every learned Yahudim. The idolatrous concept that Yahuwah could have parts violates the second of the 13 principles of faith, formulated by the Mennonites, and negates a share in the Olam Haba by any who abide in it. The belief in Yahuwah's absolute and unparalleled unity is that Yahuwah in the flesh. These idolatrous concepts that Yahuwah could have a physical form violates the third of the 13 principles of faith and negates a share in the Olam. The belief is Yahuwah's non-corporeal reality, nor that he will be affected by any physical occurrences such as movement or rest or dwelling. This brings rabbit holes in people's life. Yahushua is clearly an Elohim, a judge, yet he is not Yahuwah because Yahuwah cannot be corporal, nor can he have parts. The New Testament is quite clear in proclaiming that Yahushua is Elohim, while declaring that he was a corporal and therefore not Yahuwah, but Yahushua is Yahuwah. Christianity wishes to ensure that no learned Yahudim would ever see Yahushua as the Messiah by saying that he is Yahuwah. No learned Yahudim would ever accept such a thing as it violates Torah and the teachings, that the idolatrous concept that Yahushua and Yahuwah are separate violates the fifth of the 13 principles of faith and negates the share that Olam by any who abide in it. So to worship him exclusively, and no foreign false Yahuwahs, no false gods. So while it was Yahushua crafted into idolatrous image by many pagan churches that could never be accepted it would never be acceptable to learn Yahudim. Well, the Mennonites state that the popularity of Christianity and Islam is part of Yahuwah's plan to spread the ideals of Torah throughout the world. This moves society closer to a perfected state of morality and toward a greater understanding of Yahuwah. All this is a preparation for the Messianic age. Furthermore, Christianity has the resources to translate the Torah and take that translation to the four corners of the earth. In this task, Christianity has been an unparalleled success, being that they're succeeding in things that they probably don't wish that they were succeeding in. Thus, hiding of Messiah is essential to the Gentiles in order that they should have the merit to study Torah and see the truth about the Messiah in the Torah. Luke 21:24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and they shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Yahushua died. Can he still be the Messiah? Well, yes, absolutely. Can the Messiah come from the dead? The answer is obviously yes. And the second to the last Rasha, the foremost explainer of the scripture of the Talmud and the commentaries, when they commentary of the book of Daniel, he writes, the Messiah will reveal himself and then be concealed, and then revealed once more. And so it says in the Midrash on Ruth and in the poems of Rabbi Elijah. So it says in the Talmud, if the Messiah comes from the dead, he will be someone like Daniel. Rasha therefore explains this to mean exactly what it says. Messiah can come from the dead. The great and holy scholars of all time elaborate on this and connects this Talmudic statement to an earlier one, referring to the prophecies of Daniel. If the generation is fortunate, the Messiah will come from the dead, i.e., on clouds of heaven, and then everyone will accept him with no reservations. But if not, he will come from the living, i.e., riding on a donkey. which means chamor, which also means physical in Hebrew. And so agrees the Kodesh Hakim Yahusef, or the Ben Ish Chad, in his commentary on this Talmud Sanhedrin, in his book Ben Yahud Ya'ada, that Messiah can come from the dead. He also explains that the topic there of Messiah ben Yahusef and how he can also be a Messiah. The Zohar states that the Messiah will have to die, i.e. go to a higher spiritual level, and return again with the new level he has attained. So writes many famous rabbis in the 13th chapter of his work, their work Sharar HaGolim, that after the Messiah arrives, he will be hidden in heaven like Moses was hidden on Mount Sinai, and then he will appear again. Finally, he states in his book, Yishaot Moshahago, that the Messiah will have to die in order to purify the generation, and he will wait in a spiritual state in heaven until it rises from the dead. And it says that in the Talmud as well, that all the above were sources from several hundred years ago, supporting the idea that the Messiah can come from the dead. So even a translation of the Tanakh contains enough truth for a Gentile to learn how and where he needs to go to learn Torah properly. Isaiah 42:6, I, Yahuwah, have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thine hand, and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles. Yahushua follows exactly the same pattern that we have seen repeatedly in the Messianic line. He is obscured in apparent. They put Yahushua in this Jesus anti-Torah idolatrous circumstances, all impossible circumstances. It takes an incredible discerning individual to begin to peel away the layers of Christianity to reveal the towering Torah of the Messiah. If we were to attempt to identify the father and the mother of the Messiah in that generation, where would we look? Would we not look to a Jewish couple who were poor and lowly as befits Messiah ben Yahusef? Would we not expect the Messiah to come from a lowly and worthy family, perhaps even one of the 36 hidden righteous men? The reason we look to lowliness to find the Messiah is because we know that what? The apple never falls far from the tree. A son always resembles his parents. So since we know that the Messiah ben Yahusef is a poorly and lowly man of incredible purity, then we would expect his parents to be lowly and pure. This is a distinction to the lineage that must produce the Messiah ben David. The Messiah ben David will be a mighty ruler, and thus he will be descended from such parents. So when you get into the genealogy that's stated in Matthew about Yahushua, there the gospel writer trims the well-known lineage of David to a neat 42 names. 3 set of 14. Why would Matthew play so fast and loose with this genealogy accuracy? There's no coincidence that the name David in Hebrew has 3 letters, whose total numerical value is 14. Each letter of the Hebrew alphabet represents a number. So, the state of the modern day Israel was formed May 8th, 1948. It was formed as a secular state, as a preliminary democracy. Yahuwah was nowhere to be found. In the founding of the state of Israel, Israel was founded by Zionists, not by religiousness people. If the redemption of all Israel was to have its perfect completion, then the land of Israel must be a monarchy led by Yahuwah. By founding a secular state, the appearance of evil was manifest. To this day, Israel remains a secular state, ruled by secularists who do not put Yahuwah first. How can the Messiah be revealed from such a place? Well, why does Yahuwah conceal the messianic line in apparent impurity? Because the impure spiritual forces suckle from the pure. The impure forces, pay no attention to their mirrored and impurity, because there is nothing to suckle from impurity. Even though there is no actual impurity in the Messianic line, the impure forces are easily fooled and deceived, and are ignorant men. So Yahuwah disguises great purity and spiritual greatness with the appearance of impurity, in order that he may rectify the world and bring forth the Messiah into light. Thus we must see that the Messiah is the hidden flower which springs forth from a seed which seems to decay just before it sprouts forth anew. So what are all these connections about? Well, they're to teach us the patterns in which the Messiah will come. That through all this, you could see adultery or whatever you want to call it, but you could see the Messianic line playing out in such a way and utilizing things that are intricate to the Yahudim, that when you're looking at this impossible situation, if you think nothing can come out of your situation, why don't you look again at this whole thing that I've laid out here of the Messianic line? Because this should be nothing but a encouragement for you to be like, wow, if the Messiah can come out of such a lowly place, how much more will he do in my life as I put my faith in him? As I put my faith in Yahushua, as I strive to have the mind of Yahushua in my everyday life.
Amen. That's right. I mean, you know, it's so amazing how all of this connects. And I mean, from to the beginning, and as we go through our study portion of this, we're going to focus on the story of Ruth, like you were talking about. And just because I found some really good study things that I think, you know, people will really appreciate, and just see how when you look at everything, all these resources that are available to you, you're able to really see what everything's really about, right? Okay, so, you know, we are going to start in Ruth chapter 4, and it's just a couple verses here, but it, like, flat out just says what it is that we're talking about, right? And so we know in context, like you've explained, you know, there's things up in the air about the validity of the descendant of David and Jesse, etc. And so we see here that this just is not so, and that everything connects just how it's supposed to be, and that salvation is for all of us, and it's your choice to be in covenant or not, right? And so we see here in chapter 4 verse 10, it says you know, that she, moreover Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. So this is so important, because we see here that in the beginning, moreover Ruth the Moabite, what do we see? We have right here, it says the Aleph and the Tav, H853 in the first line, which is an oath, right? We see that clearly, you know? And so, moreover, we are witnesses. Are we not witnesses to Mashiach and to these things that we're learning together? And so we go on in verse 11, it says, and all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. Yahuwah make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build up the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephrath, and be famous in Bethlehem. So we see here that we know from Genesis, right, that it goes back to the covenant of Abraham when he went to Ephron and weighed out the silver and bought the place in which they're buried, in which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, in the cave, right? In the gate of the city. Genesis chapter 23, verses 16 to 18, right?
Right.
And then we also see in Malachi 2:14 where it says that, yet ye say, wherefore, because Yahuwah has been witnesses between you and the wife of your youth, against whom thou hast dealt treacherously, yet she is your companion and the wife of thy covenant. Isn't that so awesome?
Yeah.
Right? And in Hebrews 13:4 it says, marriage is honorable in all, and the bed of the undefiled. And whoremongers and adulterers Yahuwah will judge. So we are witnessing that this is Yahuwah's judgment upon this covenant that he's brought together, and this is not whoremongering or adultering. This is how he has made it to be, right?
Right.
And it also says in Isaiah 48:19, thy seed also had been as the sand, and the offspring of thy bowels like the gravel thereof. His name should not have been cut off or destroyed from before me. Right? So he's telling us here that, you know, my line and Mashiach's line is not going to be cut off from before me. It will not, right? And furthermore, it says in Proverbs 31:10-11, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil, right? And so he's saying right here that he has bought her, right? And then it says that husbands, in Ephesians 5:25, which I love this verse because that's how you love me, right? And we try to love each other. Husbands, love your wives even as Mashiach has loved the assembly, you know, that are gathered in his name, that he gave himself for it, right?
Right.
And so as we read on in verse 11, you know, it says that they're like Leah and Rachel, right?
Right.
And it says also in Genesis, the covenant of the, like I'm talking about since the beginning, and they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate him. Which goes just along with what you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just so amazing. it's so awesome, because we know that, you know, Rachel, she was buried there in Ephrath, right? And so where are we at in Ruth? That's where we're at. We're in Bethlehem. This is what we're saying here. And it says in Genesis 35:16 as the proof here, and they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed and had labor there. And then later in verse 19, this is like 3 verses, and Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem, right? And in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 6, it says, and now Bethlehem in the land of Judah are not thy least among the princes of Judah, for out of you shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel, right? And in Micah, this is my favorite, one of my favorite ones. It says here, but thou Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little amongst the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me, that is the ruler of Israel, whose goings have been from of old, from everlasting. Okay, and so I encourage you to go to Micah chapter 5 and read the whole chapter, because that's a very prophetic picture of Revelation and what's to come, you know? And lastly, in Psalms chapter 132, verse 6, it says, lo, we heard it at Ephrath, we found it in the fields of the wood. Okay, so first off, we want to see here what it's talking about. Huh?
Psalms 42.
132 verse 6. We see here that it says, get this off of here, sorry. That we heard it in the fields of the wood, right? And so, what does that mean? That means that as we are out here, you know, the remnant of his people as scattered seeds in the wilderness, like you say, we have to learn and we have to die to ourselves, you know, and we have to come into covenant relationship and come into covenant understanding of how all of this works, just like the seeds of Abraham, you know, since the beginning, how, you know, like you've explained throughout, how the line is protected by Yahuwah's divine hand. And so we see,
we found it in the fields of the forest, in the boundary of Benjamin, who is likened to the beast of the forest, and it said Benjamin is the devouring wolf.
Right, yeah, yeah, see? Yeah. Because what happened to the tribe of Benjamin, right? And like all of these things. And we see here that even in the midst of the wilderness and in the wood, like this is talking about right here, we also understand here that it also means honey in the comb as hived in the trees. Honeycomb, like in the forest or the woods, right? And so in that we understand that Yahuwah is always with us because of his covenant promise. And he brings us to the land of milk and honey even in the midst of our trouble. You know, and just like David said in Psalm, and just like Mashiach, just like Joseph, you know, all of these things, it says, you know, like, he's among people that hate and despise him. You know, they all are here. You know, because that pattern is a continual pattern. And we see that so prophetically. And when we look in the book of Ruth, we see that there's no question here, you know. It says, moving on in verse 12, and let thy house be like the house of Perez and Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which Yahuwah shall give thee of this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth as she was his wife, and when he went unto her, Yahuwah gave her conception, and she bare a son. Okay? And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be Yahuwah, which hath not left thee in this day without a kinsman, that his name be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age, for thy daughter-in-law which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons hath bore him. So, you know, we see here the promises that are being fulfilled. And not only that, when we look in, you know, our study portion here, you know, and we're talking about, for instance, in the beginning of verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth and she was his wife, right? We have the Aleph and the Tav. Not only that, we have the Yod He Wahid. We have all of these things signifying the oath and the covenant relationship that is divinely blessed throughout all generations.
Right. Yeah, going back to the Psalms 132, we heard it in Ephraim. We came upon it in the region of Yar. You know, in Ephraim, this is a reference to Yahushua, who came from the tribe of Ephraim.
Exactly.
This alludes to the fact that David and Samuel were able to locate the highest place in Etras. Israel based on the book of Yahushua. We found it in the field of the wood. This is a reference to Benjamin, obviously. As it is written concerning him, Benjamin is a wolf that tears apart. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the spoil. A wolf is a wild animal living in the field. And David and Samuel found the location of the temple in the portion of Benjamin.
Right. And it's so amazing, because it's so funny that when we talk about the seed and we talk about being in the impossible places and all of these things, you know, I forgot about this one last thing, but it's so funny because we were talking about this. We're talking about now our children and what that means to grow them up right, to bring them up right, to tell them the truth, to teach them the ways in which they should go, how important that is. So in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 19 and 20, we see here the story of Samuel, which we have to remember that he's the son of Eli, and his brothers were horrible in the eyes of Yahuwah. They found no grace, favor, or mercy in the sight of Yahuwah, you know, and he told them so. And it's so funny, because as we're talking about the seed here, it says in verse 20, and Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, and said, Yahuwah give the seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to Yahuwah, and they went unto their own home. Right? And so they went and they did that, and they were blessed, right?
Right.
And so why, right? it says in verse 18, Samuel ministered before Yahuwah, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. His mother made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to the yearly sacrifice. So by his mother's obedience to the yearly sacrifice, which is on what? The Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, right? We have the bringing of the little coat to Samuel, which is the only righteous child of Levi, which is like all of these things, man. Isn't that amazing?
Right.
Just like Joseph in the coat of many colors, and like all of these things. How all of these things, the covenantal promise of the divinity of the line of the seed of the parable of the seeds, of how you should sow your seeds, how you should tend to your seeds. You know, when you have a garden, and if you know anything about gardening, it's work. So anybody, any new preacher in the Christian church or whatever that's telling you that, you know, oh, we don't have to work at nothing anymore, that's just a flat lie. You know, you're saved by grace, you can just do whatever, this, that, etc. That is just not true. It's not true, because if you're choosing not to walk in covenant relationship and like do the things that he's asked you to do, then you're intentionally walking contrary to that, and that's not a safe place to be.
What? So, Benjamin, remember Genesis 49:27 was referenced. Benjamin is like a wolf, he will prey. But when you were talking about in the wood, it made me think of Psalms 68:17, where it says, "Why do you lurk, you lofty mountains, for the mountains that Yahuwah desired for his dwelling?" Well, that really explains that at the moment when the Kodesh one came to give the Torah on Mount Sinai, the mountain came running and arguing with each other. This one said, "The Torah will be given on me," and this one said, "The Torah will be given on me." Mount Tabor came from Bet Elim, and Mount Carmel from Espania. This is what is written. "As long as I live, says the King, whose name is Yahuwah of hosts, that as sure as Tabor is among the mountains and Carmel is by the sea, it shall come about." This is Jeremiah 46:18. This one said, "I called," and one said, "I called." The Kodesh one said, "Why do you lurk, you lofty mountains? You are all high mountains, but what does lofty mean? As it says, or one with long eyebrows, or a cataract. Idolatry was done on all of you, but Sinai, upon which idolatry was never done. The mountain of Yahuwah, the mountain that Yahuwah desired for his dwelling," which is Psalm 68:17, Yahuwah descended upon Mount Sinai. This was proven to us in Scripture. That's where he desired his dwelling. What is it? Exodus 19:20. Nevertheless, even Yahuwah will dwell there forever. This is Psalm 68:17. This refers to the eternal house, and this is also referring to the tribes. At the moment when Shiloh said to build the Kodesh temple, the tribes came running and arguing with each other. This one said, "In my portion it will be built." This one said, "In my portion it will be built." The Kodesh one said to the tribes, why are you lurking? All of you tribes, why are you lurking, willing to build it on your land or your land? All of you tribes, all of you are righteous, but lofty. What is lofty? Well, thieves. He called him Gavin, which means thieves. You were all partners in the sale of Yahusef. That's what that means. You were all partners in the sale of Yahusef, but Benjamin, who did not participate in the sale of Yahusef, the mountain that Yahuwah desired for his dwelling. So we find that the 480 years beforehand, the children of Korah prophesied on this, that in the future it would be in the portion of Benjamin, as it says, "My soul yearns, it pines for the courts of Yahuwah." This is Psalms 84:3. So too it says, "Behold, we heard it in Ephrath." Judah says the Kodesh temple was built in the portion of Yehuda, as it is written, Ephraimite man from Bethlehem of Judah, in the portion of the sons of she who died in Ephrath and who died in Ephrathrath, Rachel. Perhaps it was in the portion of Yosef, who is among her sons. The verse says, "We found it in the fields of the forest." This is Psalms 132:6. In the portion of the one who is compared to the beasts of the forest. And who is compared to that? Benjamin, as it is written, "Benjamin as a wolf, he will prey." So, this should just be an encouragement to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I feel like, we should just, because we're getting ready to pray, close out, right? Yeah, I feel like we should just read this real quick, just because I think it's an encouragement. It says flat out who we are, especially talking about salvation is for the Jew and the Gentile. Just in the book of Ruth, like we see, the seed will prevail. Mashiach and Yahuwah's word is what stands, and this is our encouragement as we close today. It says in Micah chapter 5, says, "Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us, and they shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little amongst thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me that is to be a ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting. Therefore will he give them up until the time that she with travaileth have brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. And he shall stand and feed in the strength of Yahuwah, in the majesty of the name of Yahuwah, his Elohim. And they shall abide, for now he shall be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man shall be the peace when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we rise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men, and they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod and the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth in our borders. And the remnant of Yaakov shall be in the midst of many as a dew from Yahuwah, as the showers upon the grass, that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men. And the remnant of Yaakov shall be among the Gentiles, or in the woods, right? In the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest. As a young lion among the flocks of a sheep, who, if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. Thine hand shall be lifted up upon thy adversaries, and all your enemies shall be cut off. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahuwah, that I will cut off the horses of out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy their chariots. And I will cut off the cities of the land, and throw down all thy strongholds, and I will cut off the witchcrafts out of thy hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers. Thy graven images also I will cut off, and thy standing images out of the midst of thee, and shall no more worship the work of your own hands. And I will pluck up the groves out of the midst of you, and I will destroy the cities. And I will execute vengeance and anger and fury upon the heathen, such as they have not heard.
Amen. Right.
I mean, that's just flat out. That's covenantal promise, like we've saying. And in the midst of impossible places, this is where we need to cling to Mashiach. Because just like this just said, he is the way. He is the only way that, we are going to make it through. Because everything else, it says right here, he is going to be executing vengeance out of his anger and fury upon the heathen, so much that they have not ever seen before. So everything that's bad that's going on, the things that are going to be done to these bad people are going to be so much worse.
Right.
Because that's from Yahuwah. That's Yahuwah's hand coming down strong, saying, I am the right hand. I am Mashiach. This is my people, and you will not come against them. Especially when they are keeping my Shabbat, my feasts, my times, my appointed times as signs that I have given to them. So that's why it's important to read your Bible. That's why it's important to really understand what these verses are truly saying.
Right. Just like that little Psalms in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly alluding to so many things in just one verse. What is it alluding to? Yehoshua ben Nun. Yehoshua, son of Nun, together with the Messiah ben Ephraim, you could say, who wages war against the anti-Messiah. Akiva ben Yahusef is in the line of Yahushua, and this is affirmed by the Gematria 391. So likewise, it is said in Psalms 132:6, we heard about it in Ephrata. This refers to Yahushua from the tribe of Ephraim. This refers to, behold, whose name is the branch. I mean, if you can't see this, you're just not wanting to see it. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing it, you have some sort of excuse why you don't want to see it, so you can continue seeing what you want to see.
Right. It's important that, we can't be free of our sin if we're holding on so tight to it, which is the excuses and whatnot that you're speaking of. You know what I mean? How are you supposed to be delivered of something if you're just clinging so tightly to it?
Right.
You have to let it go. You have to fully surrender. And we're reminded from David in Psalms 30, chapter 30, verse 11, you have turned for me my mourning into dancing. Thou hast put off my sackcloth and girded me with gladness. So we have to remember that. We have to come together and remember that and really lean on each other. And just having that, vertical structure, as some people say, where everything is just focused on above. We can't focus on things that are happening around us. We can't focus on the hurt and the pain and everything that's coming from the hate and the casting out that's happening within our families and friends and everything. As we are coming into covenant with Mashiach and with Yahuwah when we're putting down these pagan lies and rituals and Sunday worship. A lot of times it can get lonely, and we just want to remind you that you are not alone.
Mm-hmm. Right. And with this study of the seed of the Messiah, it may seem like the Torah or something condones certain sin for certain people and not others. Well, actually, no. These certain things that may confuse us are all meant to be a sign to point to the one and only Yahushua, and to point you to the pattern that Yahuwah has clearly laid out for the Messiah. The Messiah is an incredibly pure person, without sin. He became sin for us. All these things are made clear that Yahuwah has already predestined a plan for us, even though He allows free will. He knows that we're not perfect people, and He's set across the whole playing field a path in which He wants you to be on.
Right.
But you must have the faith of the Moses' hand, so to speak, this faithful obedience, to come into what you need to do and to discern who the true Messiah is. Because, like I said, a lot of this stuff I'm teaching, it may sound Jewish, it may sound Judaic, it may sound whatever. But remember, the Yahudim people are expected to see the unexpected, and a lot of Yahudim are not accepting of the Messiah. But remember what I said, when the Messiah first appears, he will not be accepted by all, but many will cast doubts upon him because he won't be what they expected. Some will deride him and say that he's deranged and all because it's not the way that they would have arranged it for themselves. Yahuwah does play by the rules of the creation. He just uses his intellect to outsmart Hasatan. That's all. He often ends up outsmarting many of us as well, though, as I said earlier. And that's because he surpasses all understanding. We must have faith of the mustard seed. That's to clarify this mustard seed. That's why the faith. That's why, if you understand this teaching, then you'll really understand what he means by to have a faith like a mustard seed. What does a mustard seed do? It has faith that its shepherd, who puts it in the ground, who does all this to it, it has faith in its shepherd that it's going to plant it and nourish it the right way to grow it into to grow it into a tree.
Right.
But the seed, no matter how much it wants to do it on its own, is at the mercy of its shepherd. So, let this be hope for you as you get confusion saying, man, there's a lot of sin here. Can he really, this is confusing to me. When we drown in a world of false reality, the only thing we could see is things on a superficial level. But when we do that, we end up screwing up our conscience. We end up screwing up our skull. We end up screwing up everything that's valuable and eternally valuable, and everything that needs to be destroyed isn't destroyed, and your soul begins to be destroyed, and that ought not to be destroyed. So, don't look at your situation that you're in today as an impossible situation, because remember, in the impossible, the most unimaginable things can happen that change the course of the entire history of the entire world. So let's close. Dear Yahuwah, we come to you in the name of Yahushua to thank you for an amazing word, and to thank you for bringing the Messiah's advent in such a perfect time, and we patiently prepare ourselves for your return, and to take us to the place that you have prepared for us. We thank you for being a man of your word, as you do prepare a place for us, as we can hold firm, even though we have no power to sprout out on our own. You, as the good shepherd, place us sometimes in the darkest of places, so that when we get to our lowest of lowest, boom, sprouts new life, a new creation in the name of you. So in the name of Yahushua, we pray to Yahuwah, thank you, and may we come into love of who you truly are, and may the needs of all listeners be provided in a very supernatural way according to your will. In the name of Yahushua, we pray to you, Yahuwah, Abba, Father. Amen.
Amen.